Next to me, we have from the US, Brian Lippincott. And we have from India, Wapen Renba Imchen and Ashe Chak Kesang. I think they are from, will do a presentation from Zoom. And then next to Brian, we have from the Philippines and Switzerland, Alma Ruiz and Frederick Glor. I hope my pronunciation is correct. Thank you so much. And um, so we don't have to check if they are present or not. Oh, let me check if our colleague from India is ready from Zoom. Are you ready? I mean, you will go next, but are you here?
Yes, yes, we are here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, okay, the topic covered today include from Brian Lippincott, the rhetoric of ill intent, peace education opportunities presented by the Bangkok NGO Declaration. So you will go first, Brian. Okay, please, if you are ready, please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Is that working? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My paper my presentation this afternoon is related to the language used in human rights declarations in Asia, specifically from the declarations that were crafted in 1993. Um, there's the brief introduction of what we will cover. The background is that access to human rights is and has been a significant driver of conflict between Asian governments and local and international NGOs in Asia. In 1993, two competing human rights declarations were drafted and published. The first was the summer of the Bangkok NGO Declaration, joint statement of several human rights and development NGOs, and the second is the final declaration of the regional meeting for Asian states of the World Conference on Human Rights. The conceptual and theoretical gaps that I'm addressing is the lack of understanding of how communication tone affects relationships between governments and NGOs. Research questions. Question 1 focuses on the rhetorical tone and positioning of the documents. Question 2 focuses on the effects of the differences in tone. And question 3 focuses on the educational opportunities presented by the differences in tone. The research objectives match the research questions. Literature review, key definitions for this research are human rights, rhetoric, and discourse. And then Marie Benedict Dembord created a kind of a framework of different schools of thought related to human rights. So she came up with 4 different schools. The natural school, which believes that rights are natural and inherent. The deliberative school, which believes that rights are arrived at by negotiation and consensus. The protest school, which believes that rights are won through struggle and resistance. And the discourse school that believes that rights are a rhetorical illusion that facilitate conversations about power. The status of human rights in Asia is bleak, according to Amnesty International in 2022. The right to development is a contentious issue between developing nations and economic superpowers, and NGOs have strengthened their pressure on Asian governments over the last 30 years since these documents were drafted. The methodology for this report is a mixed methodology, qualitative content analysis, and grounded theory analysis. I used NVivo coding software to code the 2 documents based on 2 category level codes, peace rhetoric and conflict rhetoric, and over the course of the coding, a 3rd category level code, which was rhetoric addressing international human rights pressure, was added as the need emerged. The findings, there are distinct differences in tone and rhetorical approach between the 2 documents, and the formal declarations offer insights into the priorities, concerns, and responsibilities of the drafters and the signatories of the declarations. The Bangkok Declaration from Asian states focuses on aspirations and commitments and establishes a peaceful tone that is carried throughout the document. The NGO Declaration focuses on human rights challenges in the region and the expectations that they have for governments and their determination to have those expectations met. As the results of the coding, for the Asian States Declaration, peace-related rhetoric dominated the use of language in the Bangkok Declaration, with rhetorical elements focused on the Asian states' obligation to enact human rights, the universality of rights, and balance and sustainability in implementing these rights dominating the language. The second category that, again, emerged as I was going through these documents is Asian states addressing international human rights pressure. And so the themes that came through in that, under that category, were international double standards, global inequality, and self-determination. Conflict rhetoric came in third with a very small portion of the codes. On the screen are some examples of quotes from the documents related to peace rhetoric, the Asian states document related to peace rhetoric. For the Bangkok NGO Declaration, it strongly contrasts the makeup and the outcomes of the Asian States Declaration in that conflict rhetoric is the most common theme, followed by peace rhetoric. Under the area of conflict rhetoric, ill intent on the part of the government, government failure, and government oppression emerged as the most frequent topics and themes. And then under peace rhetoric, improved coordination, balance and sustainability, and the obligation and mutual obligation of the government came through as the dominant themes. And here are some sample quotes from the NGO document related to conflict rhetoric. Crimes against women are crimes against humanity. The failure of governments to prosecute those responsible for such crimes implies complicity. And the second quote relates to authoritarianism and suppression of democratic aspirations. The graph above on the screen now demonstrates the rhetorical divide between the NGO Declaration and the Asian Government's Declaration. The circles on the outside represent codes that are and themes that are different and distinct between the two documents. The rectangles in the center indicate codes that are in common between the two declarations. So points of harmony between the NGOs and governments relate to the role of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, balance and sustainability, government obligation, and access, and the fact that access to human rights is not fully realized. Points of tension basically relate to the role of culture. What is the role of culture in determining what rights are universal and which rights are subject to discussion? Self-determination and sovereignty, as Dr. Mark talked about this morning, are significant points of tension between NGOs and governments in terms of who has what rights, and then the pace of implementation. Governments want a measured, balanced, sustainable implementation. NGOs tend to want an all or nothing, everything now approach. And so then, as we look at these themes, they actually do relate back to, and how they emerged in these documents and how the language is used, they actually do relate back to Dembour's schools of thought related to human rights. So governments tend to use deliberative and discourse-based rhetorical narratives. Civil society and NGOs tend to use protest-based rhetoric on the international level, and then more deliberative and protest-based approaches the more local it gets. And the general population is generally underheard, with their rhetoric being translated into protest rhetoric by civil society. And this graphic here, I'm not going to explain it, but very long, but it kind of creates a picture of how the relationships are enacted here in Asia related to human rights. So you have rights holders who are kind of spoken for. NGO declarations are kind of working their way uphill towards international superpowers. So in conclusion, there's a need for balance between discourse and deliberative, natural, and protest approaches. Government tends to hold the power and uses discourse approaches and deliberative approaches to maintain that power. NGOs define rights based on the natural approach and use protest approaches to try and shift government policies and legislation. The reality is that the path toward full implementation of rights needs to balance the universality of natural rights with the deliberative negotiation and strategic use of protest language and approaches. Excessive focus on harmony by either side will not result in progress toward full implementation, and excessive protest or discourse rhetoric and positioning can create tension that catalyzes conflict, violence, and the loss of life or the further violation of rights. So peace educators have a pivotal role to play in teaching all stakeholders how to create safe spaces that balance uncompromising idealism and practical iterative improvements to human rights access that encourages peaceful coexistence between parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Okay, I think we have time for Q&A. If you have, please raise your hand and the microphones are in front of you. Any questions at all? I think you have given a very clear presentation. If not, I have a question. It might not be a very smart question, but is it possible that back then when they wrote the declaration, some certain words or some certain actions were considered acceptable back then, but once the time changed, some actions might not be acceptable right now, or some certain words have changed the implication or something. Could that be possible?
Yes, I think it's possible. I would argue that that what is seen as acceptable is based on which side you align with. So the government would say that protest language, protest rhetoric is offensive and harmful to government stability. And so they're very against that. And NGOs feel like their only option is protest rhetoric, so it's justified. So I think especially the protest rhetoric, a lot of the aggressive language is seen as acceptable still, to the most part, within advocacy movements. And I think that tension still exists.
Okay, thank you. And I think I'm talking too much already. Maybe you guys have some questions. Please go ahead. If not, Dr. Ray, should we? Ajahn Bob, please go ahead.
Thank you. Very interesting analysis of the big boy players, the government and the NGOs. And it's interesting at the end, you kind of, almost as a footnote, you notice that the local indigenous population is not really represented at all in basically what's going on. Kind of a throwback to the Cold War era, in which, well, as the Africans would put it, when the elephants fight, it's only the grass gets hurt. And we're seeing the same sort of thing where the NGOs are trying to create a new world order, and the governments are trying to establish their power and their control. And so you have this major tension at the administrative level. And we see this on every election that's going on worldwide. We see these tensions also growing up. Is social media only going to continue to polarize us in this area? Or will we ever see a situation where governments and grassroots movements and NGOs will somehow find peace and a platform to talk together?
I think that's an excellent question. I won't pretend to know the answer. But I think, for me, I think a lot of it has to come back to language in regards to are we oversimplifying a lot of these conversations? Because, so for example, sovereignty and self-determination in NGO government discourse are very strong, create a very strong tension. But most often when you see it in documents, when you see it in public press releases, it's simplified down to respect our sovereignty and give us self-determination. But the reality is each of those concepts is a huge tree of smaller issues that need to be ironed out one at a time over a negotiating table, peacefully, and even on social media, right? Like those, if we just yell about one thing, oh, I want this, and kind of like Dr. Mark was saying, like if one side reads the card this way and reacts strongly, and the other side reads the card very strongly and reacts the same way, we're never going to actually have a dialogue. And I think we're stuck in that loop of we all flash up very simple summaries of what we want without saying, well, how can I articulate this better in ways that are not aggressive, but clearly articulate my needs, maybe not my feelings. I guess is my not direct answer, but I hope it's helpful.
Thank you. And Dr. Ray, do we have some more time for some more questions, or should we move forward?
Okay, I think we have a lot of time. I'll just give a short comment. This is a great work because Brian provided the theory according to which there are 4 ways by which we can look at the concept of human rights. And then he pitted the NGO document, Bangkok NGO Declaration of Human Rights, 1993, which came 1 week ahead of the Asian government's document on human rights in preparation for the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights the same year. So he pitted NGO document with the government, and then he concluded by categorizing where the government and NGO documents meet based on the category of Dembord in the frame. So it's an excellent work. Thank you.